Hey guys, 20 minutes late here. I've been having technical difficulties. My wife is next door and cut off the Wi-Fi, so I couldn't sign on. So let me know if you can hear me and see me okay. I realize there's a bunch of stuff on the screen that's distracting and annoying. That is the best that I can do right now. And I realize it sounds really weird and echoey. I'm in my home office. I've been sick. It's not been fun. But I spent all day watching the vast majority of the Carcaño trial, and I thought it'd be good to walk through it. I ended yesterday's, here I'm going to bring up the chat here so y'all can tell me how it looks. Actually, I think it's already up, so I might not be able to see it. Oh, it's behind. There we go. Still can't see it. Well, hopefully it's all going to work out, because if not, I really don't know. I need to make sure everything is synced as well as possible. Otherwise, I'm wasting like 30 minutes of my time. And I'm sick, and I don't really want to waste time. I want to get back in bed, you know? So I'm going to get on my Wi-Fi here. I took a ton of notes today, and it was... I haven't taken a lot of notes on anything for a long time. I underline. I don't take notes. I do not enjoy that. But it's worth it. There's so many things to hold on to about this particular case. It's just tap to retry. It's hard to know how to navigate all this stuff. Why are you making me do this, YouTube? How to... Okay, yeah. Well, the picture is garbage, but it's sufficient, and I know the sound is not great, but thanks, Paul. Thanks, Lawrence. All right, well, I'm going to keep this. No, I think I'm going to close this so we have better bandwidth. All right, so I've got my notes here. I'm going to call them up. Not now. Close that. So I closed the time last night with explaining why I'm talking about this, and it is selfish, and it's not that I want a bunch of clicks. I don't think I'm going to get more than 1,000 views on any of these, and that, you know, nowadays I can usually reasonably expect more than that. But I think that this is a huge cultural inflection point for the United Methodist Church and the Global Methodist Church if they choose to watch. I've reported on Minerva Carcaño at least twice, and sometimes I've been really sympathetic with her. Other times, you know, I know that she thinks I'm a bigot that needs to grow up and be enlightened, probably. But even so, you know, after today, you know, yesterday I ended up saying, man, I can't really justify anything that she's done if they've reported it accurately. And after today, it seems like they really might not have reported it accurately. So that's concerning. Whenever you're having a church trial, you want to be able to rely on everybody telling the truth. But as it is, there is no way that the witnesses from the church council and the witness, we've only had one witness from the response council. There's no way they're living in the same universe. Somebody is lying, and in particular, it's either DS Goto and what's the name of that other guy that I liked? Craig Brown. Either they are lying and fabricating things, or Stacy Current, who is the district superintendent of the Bay District, where all of this drama went down. After hearing them talk about DS Current, I was ready to see someone who was duplicitous and defensive. She was not. And I remarked yesterday, many of the witnesses on the church council side were defensive. And I said, it's not a good look. DS Current was winsome. She was lovely. And, you know, I knew that race, so I've got a caricature in my head of people who use race as a trump card and people who participate in the victim Olympics, the oppression Olympics. And, you know, what's, I'm going to remember his name eventually. Yesterday, Craig Brown alleged that Minerva Carcaño accused him of being racist in one setting. And so I just think that's a really crappy move. But today we had a scenario where you have to figure out why it is that people were so recalcitrant to accept the bishop's direction. So many things that were said yesterday were contradicted today by DS Current. So much so that I really don't know what the truth is or where to stand. And I don't know how much of it can be substantiated in a paper trail, because one of the things that shone through today was the conference was stretched so thin. They have five districts to cover their conference. They had just combined. The Bay District is only as old as 2017. And then in that whole time, DS Current was trying to piece it all together. She was trying to get an administrative assistant that entire time. She was told that she could hire her own. The HR committee was not putting out asks for the position or advertising it or anything. She did all the work on Indeed. She hired a couple people, didn't work out for very real reasons. And then turns out, okay, so one thing I just open and close case against Bishop Carcaño yesterday was her daughter was living in this parsonage, the Presidio Park Presidio Parsonage. It belonged to a little church that had 3 members supposedly. According to yesterday, the witness said they were just she was kind of bullied into it. They brought her into a room and just made her do it. And there wasn't overt pressure, but it was just they didn't do their due diligence. Well, she has a DS Current. Well, she's not a DS anymore, but she was a DS at the time. I wasn't listening when she said what she was doing now. But she said she had a missional agenda with this property the whole time. It was not Bishop Carcaño who got things moving. She did not have her daughter in line for this position. Rather, what was needed is, at the time, Bishop Carcaño was having all this drama with the, remember that liberal megachurch that she shut down, Glide Memorial? Well, that's in the Bay District. And then DS Current was spread so thin. Both of them were needed in that area, but housing is so expensive. She said the median cost of a house there is $1.6 million, I think. I remember that right, which is just asinine. So they already have this property, and if it can be rehabbed, then it can be used as a missional base in various capacities. So the next DS could live there if need be. The bishop, the starting thing was the bishop would be there for 1 week a month to have a presence in the Bay District and be active in the area. That's what DS Current said. And then it was at that point that Carcaño also welcomed her daughter to live with her in that time. The Carcaño family started paying the utilities. Now, they didn't talk today. Current didn't say anything about the boy. That was the thing that really turned me off about the whole thing was apparently Carcaño was enabling, in some sense, her daughter living with a guy out of wedlock in this church property, which it does feel a bit different to me if the DS is in charge of arranging this rather than the bishop. But also, if the bishop is living there with her daughter while she is having relations with a man who is not her husband, that's still, just can't get over that. That just is so self-evidently wrong. So, even if that still stands, the fact that, if it's true, that Current established this house to be repaired, she, the witness yesterday, Betty, I don't remember, Betty something or other, she was a nice little old lady, Spencer. She said that there was nothing wrong with the property, that they didn't need anyone to live there. DS Current said, I think she said they could substantiate that neighbors were worried about the property. It was dilapidated and falling apart. They needed someone to live in there. She explained that renting it out is very complicated in California. They're big on renters' rights. So to get people to move out, if they don't want to move out, it costs $10,000 per person to get them out, which is also asinine. I'm so glad I don't live in California. But, they have these properties that hypothetically can be used for missional purposes. So she approaches the right people at the conference office to apply for a $100,000 loan from the St. John's Fund that was designated for missional purposes in the area. She said, hey, this qualifies. I'm going to take out a $100,000 loan, not a grant, from this to pay for repairs and renovations in the building. So at this point, Sophia is not yet working for the district, but DS Current can't find anyone to do it. She finally just begs and pleads Sophia to do it, and Sophia is willing, and so she does it. And then the conference chancellor, who is pretty much their conference lawyer, gets involved, and he says this is not nepotism. As long as her mother is not her direct supervisor, it is no problem. And that seems to be the end of it so far as DS Current is. What's her first name? It's not Candy. It's something like that. Stacy with an I. So when you hear those details in that order, it doesn't sound that bad at all. Really, if she can't fill the position, the only person she can find is someone who, I said yesterday, I work with my wife. My wife does report to me. She's the administrative assistant. She does fantastic work. I would hate doing that work with anybody else. She is sometimes, I think, psychic. She does fantastic quality work. In a small church, I think you can get away with that. But I think the difference here is, even if it's needed, even if it's a desperate situation, you have to do what you can to maintain the appearance of righteousness. And if anything smacks of corruption, this happens. Enemies latch onto it. And one of the things that became kind of clear today is there were enemies of Carcaño. It's hard not to hold on to my theories of what came before. If you followed my reporting before, I thought that there were other bishops in the Western jurisdiction that were not fans of Minerva Carcaño, and they were the ones that either mobilized the campaign to file charges against her, or they simply elevated those charges and promoted the people who were doing them such that it got immediate attention whenever charges were filed. If you remember my interview with Robert Barnes, he filed charges against Bishop Oliveto that were summarily ignored and not taken seriously. Charges against Cedric Bridgeforth were summarily dismissed. The seriousness with which the Carcaño charges were treated is weird, especially when bishops like John Scholl seem guilty of the same appearance of nepotism, the same appearance of fiscal malfeasance. Why would she get more attention? It still makes sense to me that there are people behind the scenes that decided that Carcaño was not a team player. Several of the witnesses from the church side, the prosecution, I know that's not what they call themselves, they were clear that they'd been in place. I want to say at least 3 of them had been brought in under the administration of Melvin Talbert. I've heard it from several different angles that his administration was super dysfunctional. So, the impression they give is everything was running fine until Carcaño got here. But whenever you look at how group dynamics work, there are tons of groups that create dysfunctional corporate cultures, and whenever new people get put in charge, if they try and disrupt their way of doing business, the whole system turns on them. So pastors are familiar with this all the time. Whenever they go to a new church and there's an established way of doing things that's not very Christian, if they try and interrupt that, they can get their heads bitten off. And I suspect that's kind of what Carcaño did here. And I talked about this as well in the East Pennsylvania Annual Conference. It seemed to me that John Scholl is trying to make some cultural changes to their way of doing business and evangelism there that needed to happen. If I recall correctly, they weren't even reporting correct financials by CFNA standards ever. He's just simply bringing them into compliance, and the reaction is so defensive, and it just doesn't help that he's manipulative and he strong arms things through. It would seem that Carcaño also grew increasingly intolerant of the sclerotic nature of the culture there in Cal Nevada Annual Conference. So there was a new witness today. Her name was, she was Deborah Brady. So she'd served on she was one of these that had been on board since Melvin Talbert. And all she really had to say today was kind of undoing the case of the church against, with respect to Chelsea Constant. I'll talk about her in a minute. But I'm not even remembering why I brought her up. Something about, she talked about how the bishop had started off really nice and they got along and she really enjoyed her, and then she just got worse and worse. And so I was talking with a buddy earlier. Well, this is TJ. He said it's clear that she was on a power trip and she had control issues. And yeah, some of these correspondences are undeniable. Like, she escalated way too much. But when you come to understand that there are people in your administration that have decided that they are against you, one of the things that Stacey Current substantiated today, and apparently he's going to be a witness tomorrow, there's a clergyman who became aware that D.S. Goto was going around, and I don't think Goto came today, so he's a Japanese-American DS who, I'll tell the story of him and Chelsea here in a bit. He and Craig Brown were buddies, and according to this other clergyman, I think the name was Cal or Mal, he was circulating petitions and trying to get people to file complaints against the bishop. When you're aware that people on your own cabinet are doing that, that's going to cause a certain degree of paranoia. When you have invited people to have a voice and a vote on a task force, and then they start making decisions without consulting you that hold your committee work up and imply that you don't know what you're doing, that's what I'm talking about. Is with the Trinity United Methodist Church property case. Got the story on how they did a hostile takeover. What's that called? They declared exigent circumstances and grabbed this property that was worth maybe $40 million. So they formed this task force, which, according to Stacey Current, never saw itself as the final authority as to what it would do with this property. Rather, they saw themselves as the ones doing the legwork to then submit it to the Board of Trustees and other interested parties so that they might have a helpful contribution. I'm very interested to see if that can be substantiated. So if that's the case, they were just trying to get work done, and then the conference treasurer, I forget her name, and then the chair of the Board of Trustees, who gave off vibes that he had a pretty fun time in the 70s, if you know what I mean. They, after a decision was already made about what broker they would use to decide what to do with the property, they decided to interview another broker. The first broker that they decided on, was primarily made of black people, and they were clear that they were not going to sell the property. They might sell the air above the property, but they're not going to sell the real estate. They were going to hold on to it for the conference. Well, the other outfit that these other two were driving at loves to liquidate and sell properties, which is not what they wanted to do. They didn't bring it to committee meetings. Instead, they just privately arranged it and then notified the bishop afterwards, not after the meeting, but after they had set it up, with this kind of notion that it's better to ask forgiveness than permission or something. It's just not how good business is done. So if I was Bishop Carcaño, I would have been frustrated. I wouldn't have responded by going nuclear the way she did, where she's saying that she has no choice but to see them as trying to ruin her ministry. That really, it's unfortunate how much she overreacted, because if she had been more gracious. Here's the thing. So I listened to this guy, James Lindsay, and I recently listened to him talk about how, wokeism is modern day Maoism. If you're familiar with the Cultural Revolution in China and how Mao Zedong manipulated that entire nation into a kind of collective brainwashing, there is a way of psychologically abusing people. It's not as overt here, but when woke people are met with resistance, what they do is intentionally, kind of casually provoke their enemies. They don't do things that are just above and beyond the pale. They don't physically assault people. They don't sue them. They just gum up the works. They say passive-aggressive things. They make implications. And so what I suspect is Bishop Carcaño shutting down Glide Memorial, which was the crown jewel of liberalism in the United Methodist Church. Bishop Carcaño shutting down Craig Brown for a bishop's position. I've seen the footage where he was up and that didn't happen, and then Cedric Bridgeforth was up for a episcopacy position that they would recommend, and he got shut down there, and Carcaño seemed to have something to do with it. So I made the connection sound a little more firm than it actually is. This is not proven. This is a theory. But if she's already built up this bad will with people who's, Craig Brown doesn't score any woke points, but if he thought he was going to get the biggest church in the annual conference, and then he didn't, and so that would explain sour grapes there. And then if Bridgeforth is against her, if Olivito, who headed up Glide Memorial before she became bishop, and then the new Bishop Carcaño shut it down, this is building up bad will with two new rising stars in United Methodism, who then get to handle these complaints and do what they want with her. There's two new bishops over there, Dottie Escobedo Frank. I don't know if she was there today, but also, I forget his first name, but the last name is Rapinoe or something like that. I think he's Filipino. He's gay. No, is he gay? I don't think he's gay. I'm going to take it back. I don't think he's gay. I saw him in the camera today. He was there. I don't know where he lines up. I don't know where Dottie lines up. I know that I don't agree with what she's doing in her conference. Anyway, I need to wrap up, but I got to tell the news story that was told today. There was a young clergy named Chelsea Constant. In 2019, she wanted to be a church planter. She was working as an associate at a church. They had a church planting thing as a conference, and she decided she wanted to plant a church. She came up with a good plan that the conference really liked, but then they heard that she was pregnant and that her maternity leave, she was requesting the full 3 months, and it was going to overlap with the first 2 months of starting the church plant. And so they were asking, how's this going to work? Who's going to be paying this? Is the conference going to be paying this? Finally, the church said they would pay for it, so that took care of it. But they were also reluctant to give the full 12 weeks, and they were reluctant to even do it for her at that point. The way that Stacy Current explained it today was she and Bishop Carcaño had both gone through pregnancies before in the midst of ministry and seen how difficult that was, and they admired Chelsea Constant for her ambition, but they also just thought that she was being too ambitious, and they wanted to pump the brakes on it till she was at a different stage. And man, oh man, was this interpreted as inappropriate, interventionist. The way she talked about it, it was like, well, they were inquiring into her sex life, something that intimate. And the irony there is that's what they're supposed to do. And the inference being it's inappropriate for oversight to care about one's family dynamics. I'll tell you, man, there's nothing more important than one's family dynamics. And if my higher-ups in the church don't even care about if I'm poisoning my marriage or if I'm not giving enough attention to my kids, then they are not ministering to me well. So I just, the whole time, even before I heard Stacy Current explain the way they were talking about her behind the scenes, even to hear her talk about it, it was just, she seemed incensed that anyone would question her call. And dude, there are so many people who have a call that is not legitimate. It is not feasible or realistic, and the purpose of the church is to mediate that. She did have a mediator, Shinya Goto, who's her district superintendent, the one who is very against the Bishop Carcaño. Chelsea ended up wanting to meet with Minerva Carcaño one-on-one, as anyone would want to do, to clear the air and figure out what's going on. Why am I not getting the full 12 weeks? Why am I not getting the full-time appointment for this church plant position? And Goto refused to even set it up for her. And when she asked why, he took a paternal tone that, Carcaño, she's just so mean, and I'm afraid that what she would say would just turn you off to ministry altogether, and I've got to protect you. And I just think that's really crappy. I think it's crappy that he did it, and I think it's crappy that she accepted that. It's funny, everybody was trying to be paternal to her. She doesn't look that old. She looks like she's in her 30s. And that I'm sure they all wanted to take care of her, but you had these two women that knew what it was like and wanted to pump the brakes and help set her up for success, and she just wasn't going to hear it. So they ended up giving her the full 12 weeks. They created the position for quarter time, but made sure that she was rooted three-quarter time in a church that was functional and could pay. What the respondent council, Carcaño's defense said time and again was, you keep portraying her as this leader who will not compromise, won't give an inch, won't listen whenever she's made up her mind. But here you have an instance where she started off really being pretty against it, but with continued pressure and intercession, she gave in. And how do we make sense of this? So that's the sort of thing where they talk through it, and I'm going, yeah, I see them painting this picture, and I see these angry emails, and you can cling on to that, but then you have to discount some other things. And I've reported on Carcaño for a long time, and there have been a bunch of left-leaning people that have commented on my stuff saying, oh, she's no good, she's not with the left, she is a plant. She's a person of the left, but what I suspect more, I do think she has a big ego, but I also think she has a notion of integrity, which for the majority of the woke, it's the ends justify the means. I don't think so. It seems to me, and I could be wrong, we got 3 or 4 more days of this trial, but it seems highly realistic to me that she does not share in the same traditional Christian values as me. She probably thinks I'm a moron, but she has a sense of integrity that makes it so that she doesn't want to be complicit in group dysfunction, and she wants to make things better than she found them, and not I don't know. I still got to piece it together. But, it's at the point now where you're looking at both sides and going, okay, who seems most inclined to lie? And so, I sit at a comfortable place where I'm going, well, I think they're all wrong theologically. I think they're all serving a very problematic and not faithful version of Jesus. I think they're creating a version of the church that is inimical to holiness. And so it's hard. It's easy for me to just say they're all off base, but figuring out the how is the key. As I've been paying attention, I've been hoping that this is an inflection point for the United Methodist Church, and that they use it as an opportunity to clean house with the corrupt, defunct, sclerotic, bureaucrat leadership of the denomination on every level, because they just, as more and more of these stories leak out, you see that this is endemic throughout the connection. And so you can either just ignore that and get mad at anyone who brings it up, or you can finally do something about it. And my hope is that they finally do something about it. And I think if you clear out the bad actors, you clear out the manipulators and liars, you can't do it 100%. But I think all of a sudden, you can have a denomination with integrity that actually honors the covenants it's a part of, So wouldn't it be great if this trial is a spark that ignites a fire for a concern for integrity that helps, woke people are not going to receive help, but liberals can listen to reason sometimes. And if liberals could understand, man, you got to see my Lonnie Brooks interview if you haven't. The juice isn't worth the squeeze whenever it compromises your integrity to the degree that the United Methodist Church is required from people. So that's why I got out. That's why I continue to pray for the United Methodist Church. I just think when you have an institution that's so compromised like that, it's not only is it not saving souls, but it's compelling them to rot. It's searing souls so that they're not even sensitive to the indwelling sin that is dragging them to hell. So that's the reality for me. Anyway, I think I talked about, there's 100 more. It was a full day of people talking and giving facts. There's no way I can give all of it, but I'm providing theories to explain what's going on, and I welcome feedback with input as to what's going on. I said yesterday that I really identified with Craig Brown because I've been bullied by power dynamics around the bishop's office, and I'm inclined to believe anybody who goes through the same thing. I just know that it's simpatico, but that I have to acknowledge that bias and then go, well, just because somebody has a story like mine doesn't mean it's true. I think that's what the lesson of the Me Too movement was. One connection that I drew today, I know I said I was going to stop, but I've heard it said that President Donald Trump had these closed-door meetings with individuals where he demanded fealty that they essentially kiss the ring and demand their support. And then there are several witnesses that have reported the same thing that Carcaño has done, that she called them into her office and demanded that they give dirt on somebody because her loyalty is to her and not to others. Current said she doesn't even talk that way. She's too proper to use the term "give me dirt." It just doesn't even fit with the profile. So either Carcaño is that egotistical that she gives into this mentality that people like Donald Trump have, where they need to have people swear their fealty and know that they're on their team, or they know that there's such a distaste for Donald Trump in that area that if they caricature her to look like him, then it's just easier to hate her. So I'm not a psychic. I can't say who's lying and who's telling the truth. But as I draw these connections, I just wonder how many other people are. So anyway, Bishop Carcaño, if you ever just want to call me up and tell me exactly the truth, you're welcome to. I don't expect you will. But hey, my concern is that they're going to do all this he said, she said, and at the end, everybody's just going to be like, I don't know. So I hope that the truth gets revealed and there is clarity about what needs to happen. I think that's a good prayer to say over the coming days as Bishop Gwynn is trying to lead everybody in that direction. All right, I'm feeling crappy.